So, without further ado, let's meet Kim Mills, the musings of a Canadian military spouse. So first off, I'm just going to put my camera on for just a minute so that you can see who I am as I'm introducing Kim. We are thrilled. My name is Margaret McKenzie, and we are thrilled to be partnership with True Patriot Love in this really exciting virtual guest speaker series. And Kim Mills from She Is Fierce is starting it off today. And the primary purpose of this workshop, it's called Operation Building Bridges, is to connect military, veterans, and community healthcare providers and learn how leadership and perseverance can positively affect mental health throughout the military community. Because many healthcare providers and clinicians may see veterans or military families on unrelated issues, a secondary goal is to help these professionals develop a better understanding of the culture in which veterans and their families live and work every day. So Kim is the wife of an armored soldier, and together they recently saw the finish line of their 4th deployment. She's the mother of 3, a writer, a speaker, and an advocate for military families. She's an avid Starbucks addict and the author of SheIsFierce.net. Kim and her family are currently posted to the Edmonton area, where she spends her time writing and occasionally has the opportunity to travel the country to engage others in their journey, to encourage others in their journey. We also have the privilege and the blessing of having Kim's folks here online with us. And so they're really excited to be able to hear their daughter speak. So without further ado, we're going to go over to you, Kim, and thank you so much. I'm going to pass you the ball now.
Hello.
One
this
second.
Is new to me, and I have, it's super weird to sit here. And normally, if any of you have actually seen me speak in person, maybe some of you might have seen me in Petawawa or Cornwall or Trenton or somewhere. I'm usually like walking a lot and talking with my hands, and I have to sit in this chair and stare at you. But I can't see you. I can absolutely see absolutely nothing. So you're going to have to bear with me, because I feel like I'm talking to the wall in front of me a little bit.
Which slide do you want to be on, Kim? Which slide did you want to be on?
This one's good. This one's fine.
Yes, the introduction slide, right?
Yeah, I can switch them myself, I think.
Great.
Yeah, look at that. I'm good. Okay. Yeah, everybody's now quiet. If you can just make sure that it gets really, really loud when everybody turns their mics on. So as long as you can keep those down, I could probably pay attention. Otherwise, I'm going to be like, oh, did I hear a kid in the background? I get distracted really easily.
Squirrel.
Yeah. So like Margaret said, I've been talking to Margaret for a while. I would have met her right there in Cornwall. But we decided after a little bit that I just absolutely love this program that she's got going on here with the virtual conference. And a lot of the spouses that I talk to, they're having a hard time connecting to their local groups. They're having a hard time, whether it's because they've got a bunch of kids at home and they don't feel that their group, that maybe the local support systems are accommodating to that. Maybe they are, but they just, they're remote, it's not quite as far away, or they just don't feel like they've met other people that understand their experiences. And so I'm really hoping that by having enough people come out to these virtual sessions, that you guys will be able to see more of these sessions as time goes on. So the more people that you can invite out, I know this is only the first of 3 sessions. So you have Vince coming up, and then Jody Mittick as well. Those should be pretty amazing. I know I didn't even sign up for my own session until today, but I totally signed up for Jody Mittick's session like weeks ago. So clearly my priorities are much higher than everybody else's when it comes to which one I really wanted to see. So invite your friends. There's lots of people that can come out once you see how easy this is, and the fact that you'll be able to make dinner or do whatever else it is for you to be able to do. I'm hoping that you get the chance to do that. So like Margaret said, most of you guys that have come out here, you came out because you knew who I was, which makes the first part a little bit awkward, because I found that when I meet people, especially I meet them at mess dinners or military functions, and I start telling them a story that I think is super exciting, And they're like, yeah, Kim, we totally just read that on your blog. And I'm like, oh, I have nothing left to tell you. So I'm just going to stand here and yeah, so I'm hoping that I for you for the first little while. I realize that a lot of you guys will have heard some of these stories before. That's totally fine. Maybe you've never heard me actually say them, so maybe that'll help out a little bit. So I'm not sure how many of you guys have read Chia Spirits or how long you've been reading it. Chia Spirits started in, I looked back and I think it was around 2010. So in 2010, I was approached by CBC and they wanted to find a military family that was willing to share the experiences that they had with Remembrance Day. The war in Afghanistan was starting to wind down, and there was, clearly the concept of Remembrance Day had changed over that decade, and they wanted to, that's all they told me. They just wanted to know more about our stories. They actually had me do some video stories where I got to talk about what Remembrance Day looked like, but for us, but when they asked me to do that, they asked me to create some kind of blog page where I would be able to filter some of those stories over to, and they could send people as part of this kind of web program that they were running. And so I created a blog page. It was actually called kimberlymills.blogspot.com or something like that. It had my entire name in it. It was completely unoriginal. And because I felt like when CBC asked me to do this that nobody was ever going to read any of it, I actually just called it This Is My Blog because they told me to write a blog. So I was like, fine, this is it. And I wrote it. And the first little bits were just stories about our life, and I wrote what they asked me to based on Remembrance Day. That one of those first posts there, it was called The Moment on the Stairs, and it was me talking about what I thought about when I stood at a Remembrance Day service. Well, when CBC made that presentation, they created this whole website, and it had a poppy with five petals, and each one of those petals represented one of the stories. Well, one of those stories was mine. The other stories all represented military families that had either dealt with a catastrophic injury or the loss of their service member during the war in Afghanistan, whether it was a child or a spouse or the member themselves. So when it came to my story, I was horrified. I was horrified for weeks afterwards. I thought that they just had me tell a story like it was relevant when clearly those people have much more compelling reasons to talk about Remembrance Day. They have much more stories, much more important stories to share. And I kind of held on to that for a little bit. I kept up with the blog. I kept kind of writing on it. It was shortly thereafter that I actually did, we did a feature for Today's Parent. So Today's Parent actually came out to my house and they did this like photo shoot with like the big cameras that we'd actually never had a family photo done before ever. And that became this, it became our family photos, the first ones we'd ever had taken. And it was just supposed to be, they were talking about different types of families across the country. We represented the military families. And then again, it ended up kind of pushing back into the blog. And so I kept it up for these reasons, and I just started to continue writing it. Well, in 2012, they asked me to take another look at it. And as we started moving across the country, we were then at that point posted to Kingston. I started kind of glancing at what this blog looked like at this point, and I'd never even looked at the analytics. And there's all kinds of stuff about blogging that you can study and find out, who's coming to visit your page and how often they come and how many people come. And I realized there were thousands of people going to the page, and I probably wasn't related to all of them. So I probably should look at what I was going to do with it. Either I was just going to shut it down because I had no idea what the purpose was, or I was going to turn it into something. And so we decided as part of the move, I was going to turn it into something a little bit more professional. First of all, I needed a little bit more anonymity. kimberlymills.blogspot.com is probably not the best way to go about that. So I rebranded the page. We use some of that, posting money that you get because you don't eat $75 worth of food in a day. And I paid someone to brand the page. And we talked about this while we were waiting for this to start, that They made that She Is Fierce girl who looks not very much like me. And the rest of the page started from there. I bought a URL, I changed it to sheisfierce.net. It became something a little bit more professional. I still didn't know what to do with it, but I wasn't quite ready to shut it down yet. I started getting messages at that point. I started getting dozens of messages from Canada and the US. People wanted to know, they have questions. They wanted to know, my spouse is just starting in the military. My spouse just came back from Afghanistan. My spouse is just leaving for deployment. I have questions. I want to know where I can go to for support. I want to know what I can do. I want to know what you think about this situation. I want to know what I should wear to a mess dinner. None of those are questions that I am qualified to answer. But I had to figure out something. I had to be able to answer these. I had to be able to reach out to these people because it was clear that there was a need for this community, especially within the Canadian military community. There are quite literally thousands of American military family blogs on the internet, thousands. And some of them are really amazing, and I have some great friends that are part of that American military community. But there's not a lot out there for Canadians. And so I took that and I decided I'm gonna have to have some kind of voice. The least that I could focus on, if I can think of anything, is that it was gonna have to be positive. It's gonna have to be authentic. It's gonna have to be real. I'm not gonna be a military spouse that's going to look like I have a whole bunch of answers. I'm certainly not going to write a whole bunch of posts on, like, how not to dress at a mess dinner, because Lord knows I do not have the right to tell anybody what to do in that regard. It was going to have to be things that were really going to be positive, that were going to have to encourage people. Otherwise, there was absolutely no purpose. And so starting in 2012, it became a little bit more accomplished. I started really trying to create a community, and what we did was, together, all of the people who were watching the blog, all of the people who were commenting on the Facebook page, we created a community of people that I think is really positive, people that wanted to support each other on the journey, or people just wanted a place to connect. People just wanted somewhere on the internet where, maybe you're posted and you don't feel like you have any friends, or maybe you don't really have a lot of connection or feel you need it in the place that you are when it comes to the military, but when you turn on your Facebook, sometimes it's nice to know that that's there. To know that there's a little bit of something that kind of reminds you about the community that you're part of. When I started writing, and this, as we talked about, the purpose of this particular presentation is about moving from enduring as military families into thriving. And the idea came from a conversation that I had with a really young lieutenant. And so I met this young lieutenant at my husband's work. I had to run in late one day to pick up some paperwork with him, and I started talking to this kid. I'd never met him before, and he started telling me about the regiment. Now, if your husband or spouse is involved in the Canadian Forces, they may or may not be part of the combat arms. If they are part of the combat arms, you probably understand that there's a concept of regimental pride, regardless of what your regiment is, that you usually hold on to a little bit. And for this lieutenant, he didn't have any of it. It was quite shocking to me because everyone else I'd ever met had at least something. But he felt the regiment had done nothing for him to garner his support. He didn't think that he just needed to be proud of being in that regiment, especially when he didn't feel like they'd done anything for him. He didn't feel like there was a community for him to get involved in. He didn't feel like they offered him anything that he needed. He didn't feel like they connected with him as part of a family. He just flat out said, I am not proud to be part of this unit. And so I had to think about that for a while in the conversation that we had. And so that's where we're coming at with the idea of enduring to thriving, as we talk about what is our responsibility for that. What is the responsibility that we have when it comes to our own resiliency as military families, and what can we expect from the outside? And if we're not getting what we expect, then do we just need to roll over and die, or do we need to try and create something on our own? So I'm going to give you a little bit of our story as a family now. I realize that you guys probably have heard a little bit of this. It's kind of the downfall about having your life on the internet, is that people tend to know it already. But in order for you to understand kind of where we're coming from, or the reason why I don't write, 101 ways to wear a mess dinner dress, It's because we started this when I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I got married in 2001 when we were both teens. Actually, I had just turned 20. And we moved into a PMQ. It was 500 square feet of asbestos with overpainted cupboards that didn't close. The electricity was not grounded, and there was a tree growing out of the foundation. And we were deliriously happy because we were together, and the only reason that we could afford to get married was because he was in the military. I knew absolutely nothing about what the Canadian Forces looked like. Nothing. My family, my parents, it's not a military family. My husband's family was a military family, but by the time I was old enough to really connect that as a teenager, his dad had retired, and they lived in Calgary. And so the only thing that I thought the military had to offer me was that I got to have a really cool sword party at my wedding. And when I left, walked down the aisle, that last soldier in that sword party, he took down the sword and he smacked me on the butt. And they all said, "Welcome to the Corps." And I felt like I had just got part of the coolest club ever. And that was it. I knew that my husband was training. He was probably going to be heading to Bosnia relatively soon. He was part of some military competitions. He was rarely home. I think in that first 12 months, he was only home for maybe 3-ish months. But we'd only been married for 9 months when 9/11 happened. He was away. And so he was away training, and I was wearing nursing scrubs. I had just worked an overnight shift at a shelter, and I'm sitting on top of a pile of laundry in my living room, and I'm watching TV, and I turn it on right as the second plane is hitting the second building, and I'm sitting there staring at it, and I'm absolutely positive that this is going to change up. It's going to change everything, and I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, I think I kind of wrapped my head around what a sun tanning deployment in Bosnia looks like, but I certainly did not understand what the rest of it did. So he was immediately put. He was home. He was put on. I think it was 2 hours notice. They sat and they waited and they waited and they waited, and finally in February, it was actually 02/02/02. I was 2 months pregnant. And they shipped off. And so I stood there in the LTF and I watched them leave. At that point, and I don't know how many of you are closer to my age, there was no internet. There was email, I think, it existed. I don't even know that I used it. They had satellite phones. Afghanistan, it was just ramping up. They got there to set everything up. And so there was no phones, and my husband's particular job, it's not something that has a lot of luxury like phones. So we sent real paper letters, and my ultrasound, it took 9 weeks to arrive. On April 18th, 2002, is when I want to say if you could make a timeline of when things started to change as military spouses after 9/11. 9/11 was a big one, and that first deployment there on February 2nd, that's up there too. April 18th was when the first 4 soldiers in Afghanistan were killed. That was a friendly fire incident. But nobody was ready for that, including the media. And so anyone who remembers that time, the media actually announced that day that 4 soldiers had been killed, but they weren't able to tell us their names. They weren't actually able to tell us until the next day. And so I waited all night. And I sat there, and you sit and you listen. And at that point, I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had no idea what a notification would look like. I had no idea what my phone was going to ring, if my doorbell was going to ring. You're kind of just sitting there waiting. And obviously, my doorbell didn't ring. By the next morning, I found out that they had been Patricia's, those 4 soldiers. And that's, I think, as a military spouse, that's the worst feeling, because you have this overwhelming sense of relief, and then you realize that you have to feel guilty about that. You're relieved when everybody else is, when obviously 4 other families are hurting. In 2002, there was a partner support group, and this is something I want to highlight as part of what we're doing, and we're going to go back to some of these things that worked and didn't work. There was this partner support group in 2002. So I showed up to some of those rear party things. I was 20 years old. I was pregnant. One of those things, I walked in, this lieutenant came up to me, and he said, "What's your husband's name and rank?" And I told him that he was a trooper, and he turned around and he walked away. That was it. He was done. A trooper was not a Patricia, and it certainly wasn't, some kind of level of importance. And I was horrified, and I kind of sat in the back because I had to know the information they were giving out, and then I ran off, and I didn't come back until this partner support group that had already been started. One woman called me. She cold called me. I had never seen her before in my life, but apparently her husband in Afghanistan used one of his satellite phone calls to call her and say, "Look, Milsa's wife is not doing awesome. Can you give her a call?" And she did, and that still amazes me to this day. She called me and she invited me out to one of these potlucks, and we set up. We met every week and we had dinner. Sometimes we grabbed like KFC or Tim Hortons on the way, and that was our contribution to the potluck. Is like, "I'm sorry, ladies, I'm done this week. Here's some donuts. Hopefully this works with what everyone else brought." Usually, enough people brought everything else that it all kind of balanced out. The first partner support group meeting that we had after April 18th, there was quite literally nothing on the table except chocolate desserts. So I think that sometimes those things are just entirely meant to happen. Those partner support groups, they threw up ribbons. We put up the yellow ribbons when the guys got back. I even went to the return support. So we had these social workers come and they talked to us about what it would look like when the guys got back, try to help us talk through our feelings. And, I sat and listened and talked in on one of those. And I thought, oh, this is a safe place. And I'm going to tell them that I'm really feeling self-conscious. My husband has not even seen a picture of me, never seen me pregnant. And now I'm going to show up. And he's gonna come home from Afghanistan, and I'm gonna be this like beach ball of a pregnant woman, and I'm terrified he's gonna be grossed out. He's not gonna think I look nice. I really do look like a beach ball when I'm pregnant. I'm not very good at pregnancy. Anyway, I told this story. Of course, he reassured me that wasn't going to be my husband's thoughts. It was just something that was sitting on my mind. And the problem was I didn't realize that those same social workers actually flew to Guam for decompression. And they were the ones that gave the conferences to the soldiers who were coming back from Afghanistan. I also didn't realize that I was the only woman that was still pregnant by the end of the deployment. Everybody else had already given birth. And so when they told the story, the social worker stood in front of the men and talked about how he had met with the spouses. He told a very innocent story about some young wife that was pregnant and worried her husband wouldn't find her attractive. The only problem was they all turned around and looked at my husband like he was a jerk.
Oh no.
So I did learn that sometimes you should think these things through. But by the end of that deployment, I had met some super amazing people. And I had met them, and we're going to highlight this at the end, I had met them not because someone had created something or someone had made a class or someone had, invited us to a scheduled program that was funded by the government in some way. I met them because a bunch of wives decided that they needed to do something to get together, and we did that. When Nathan came back in 2002, one thing that I always say when I'm speaking in front of people is that I tell my story, and I don't tell other spouses' stories, but I also don't tell my husband's story. I will say that, in that particular deployment, I hadn't seen any communication between the two of us, and reintegration, it sucked. It sucked. There was a lot of nightmares. There was a lot of sleeping in the guest room. There was my husband's 21st birthday happened about a week after he got back, and it found us, I think, crying on the floor of the kitchen because we didn't think that anybody else was going to have this kind of problem. We figured that we were the only ones that just could not seem to get it together. Never mind the fact that he came home, and less than a week later, we had a baby, and then we immediately moved out of the PMQ and into another house, and we did all that within like the first few weeks of the reintegration process. Nobody told us that wasn't a good idea. Nobody was standing there with us saying, you know what, we're all going to find ourselves on the kitchen floor at some point. We're all going to find ourselves we're all going to find ourselves messy. We're all going to be trying to push ourselves together. We're all going to be getting to this point. Nobody kind of knew that they needed to tell each other that because we're all too busy trying to tell everybody that we were going to be okay. Between that, we had forest fires, and we had forest fires that when my son's first birthday party came down, we invited 40 people to show up for this big birthday party extravaganza. I only had one kid. He was turning 1. Why not have a whole bunch of people over to our house for a big party? And yeah, so the Thursday before the Friday party, the phone rang, and I think, told whoever it was that was calling DH that he wasn't allowed to talk to him. But in the end, he of course had to, and he left on 1 hour's notice for the forest fires in BC. We had a great birthday party anyway, and it was the year after that that he headed back to Afghanistan for the second time. At that point, I had a hard time with the fact that the community in general had forgotten that Afghanistan was a thing. So my first deployment was 2002 in Afghanistan. 2002 in Afghanistan, the whole country knew that they were leaving. It was a whole huge deal for everybody. 2004, everybody's like, really? I thought we all came back from there. Is that really what's still happening, hey? Well, good on him. Glad he's there. By 2007, when he went back, it was pretty much routine at this point. And most of the people you talk to were like, oh, this was never a good idea. We never should have gone in the first place. As though that is going to help you, right? That's going to make things easier if you tell me why you think it's useless that he's there. But people like to do that. We left in 2007. I thought that I completely had it under control. I mean, my husband, this was the third time around. We had a whole lot of people around us that we knew. We'd been posted to the same place for quite a while. I had 2 young kids. I was pregnant. But again, lots of friends, lots of support. I figured we were good to go. About 1 month in, my husband's squadron lost his first member. His name was Corporal Nathan Hornberg. In December, my husband was supposed to come back. He was going to come back for Christmas because my due date was Christmas Day, and he'd been given that leave time, which was really nice. We didn't think I was going to make it to that time. I'd always had babies early, but even though I did go into labor about 32 weeks, we were able to hold off, and I actually had the baby about 20 hours back, 20 hours after he arrived from Afghanistan. I told my doctor that I wasn't willing to have the baby until he got back, and that time was actually the first time he believed me because I had already told him that twice before and had always managed to do it. So he actually wasn't all that surprised the third time around that I was able to hold out. So 20 hours after that, I had a baby in HLTA. We joked the other day, we went to West Edmonton Mall. I asked him if he wanted to go back to do some Christmas shopping. My husband hates the mall. He looked at me like I was crazy. I said, come on, we went at Christmas time, you know, when you were on HLTA. He's like, yeah, and I didn't even sleep that night. I said, don't be a drama queen. You didn't sleep that entire HLTA. And it's true. He didn't sleep that entire HLTA. He had a baby. He had just got back. Nobody reintegrates in 2 weeks while they're home on HLTA. Sometimes he didn't even want to sleep on the bed. I actually would catch him sleeping on the floor. Or he'd wake us all up trying to find his rifle. It wasn't really worth him trying to sleep. When he left, I had a 10-day-old baby, and he went back to Afghanistan again. And then with 1 month, actually even less, with about 3 weeks left in his deployment, or 3 weeks left before he came back, he still had to go on reintegration in that time. Trooper Mike Hayakazi was killed by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. My husband actually didn't ever get to go back after that operation. So as soon as Trooper Hayakazi was killed, they sent him by helicopter out to the airfield so that he could be part of one of the pallbearers for his ramp ceremony. And he actually never got to leave the main base again after that. They sent his stuff from the forward operating base that he lived at, and he went straight from there to Cyprus to do his decompression. I spent the about 12 hours before I picked him up from that deployment. I was at Mike's funeral, and I saw the escort that he brought back, and this kid was 21 years old, and he had also never gone back. As soon as Mike was killed, he had, as escorts do, He was sent back with him, and he'd been with the family and with the body for that entire time, and now it was the funeral. He walked in his tan combats behind the casket, and that's his job. And I looked at that kid and I realized that he was only maybe a few months older than Nathan had been on his first deployment, and the scars that you would hold on to from that just looked devastating. And I realized that there was so much that I didn't experience, so much that I was never going to understand. But all that left us with is that in 2008, after he's back, we fall into a routine. He tried to get on a fourth deployment. He actually went all the way up the chain of command to get it signed off, but in the end, they just wouldn't send him. We ended up posted to Kingston eventually. Now, the super fun thing about Kingston is that it is always a good idea to take combat soldiers and just dump them behind a desk at a cubicle, because they do super good at that. They don't. They never do. They don't know what to do at a cubicle. It was the weirdest change that any of us go through. But we learn to adapt. You learn to slowly, understand a new normal, right? You get used to that. It ends up with a family that's not tired. They're war weary, right? We're tired of what we were doing, but at the same time, we don't really know how to stop doing it. It colors absolutely everything. It colors the entire lifestyle that you lead. My daughter's prayer at night when Nathan was gone, the entire time we were in Kingston, she would pray for her daddy in Afghanistan, and we'd be like, he's actually, in Wainwright. And she'd be like, oh, it's okay, Mommy. Wainwright's just a city in Afghanistan. Maybe it feels like that sometimes, but it's actually not. It's in Alberta. You feel like you're wearing war-colored glasses, right? Those glasses that, like, every time you look at something, you wonder if that's going to be the next thing, that's going to be the next deployment. But at least with a family that's tired but average. And remember we talked about the CBC presentation? I saw all these other families that that were talking about these catastrophic things that had happened to them through the war. They had lost someone, or they had had some kind of debilitating injury that had happened to their spouse or their child. My husband always came back, and he always came back physically whole. He does not suffer from OSI or PTSD. He's never been captured. He's never taken a bullet. I mean, every single soldier, I believe, that's ever been in battle comes back different, and my husband's not an exception. There's an entire sacrifice that's involved with coming home and having to leave kind of that behind every single time that you have to do it. But we're average, and the more that I thought about that, the more that I started to think, we don't really have a story, because the stories are saved for the families that I'm sorry, my computer just like, oh, there you're back. Oh my goodness, that scared me. Okay, there we go. So, you don't feel like you really have something that you need to say. And so it kind of weighed on me for quite a while that the more that I started being reached out to by other families, the more I started really realizing that we didn't have anything that was so particular to talk about. There was so many times I thought, you know what, there's not much that I could share that someone else doesn't have a better story, a more compelling story, a story that they've been through more, they've suffered more, and a lot of times you can have that feeling for yourself that you don't have the right to tell stories because your story isn't as important as somebody else's. No matter what it looks like, you're kind of left behind, I guess, and as they come back, you don't really know what that sound. When I talked in Trenton at one point, I said that it feels like you're kind of full of stories that never really needed to be told. Books were saved for people who lost soldiers. Books were saved for people who, lost limbs or suffered some kind of injury, whether it was physical or emotional. But things aren't written. Things don't need to be written about people who just, quietly done their job over the past few years and have always been fortunate enough that wasn't something that they experienced. So when I was in Trenton, it was 2014, and they asked me to come in. They wanted me to speak at a fundraiser that was to raise money post-Afghanistan. And I did. They wanted me to talk about what it was like to be a military family during peacetime. And the funniest thing about that, looking back on it, was that about 6 months later, my husband was back at another deployment. That deployment was a little bit quieter. I felt a little bit like I could breathe. And we actually got to go to Thailand for HLTA. Now, again, HLTA is never a good idea. And our posted message actually came on that HLTA. When I got back from Thailand, I had to go and speak in Petawawa. I also had to list my house, paint it, get it all ready, put it on the market, try to sell it before he got back. Nobody really ever is prepared to do that. Now, when I was speaking in Cornwall, when I told this story, I said that by the time I got to Petawawa, I was so hungover, which what I meant to say was that I was so jet-lagged, but apparently the words did not come out properly. Either way, I was not prepared for getting to Petawawa, and I especially was not prepared to get there, and I was speaking at a Strike Behind the Uniform event. And so before we talked, nobody knew who I was. I just kind of stood in the back, and I watched these women come in, and again, these are women who have been standing behind soldiers that have come back catastrophically wounded. They've been supporting soldiers that have had, extensive injuries from the time in Afghanistan. And I'm thinking, who am I? Like, why am I talking to them? I don't have anything that I could possibly offer them. But in the end, as I started talking, I realized they just wanted someone to share their stories. They just wanted somebody to share any stories, and those stories became all of our stories. And so my husband got back from that last deployment. He ended up having to go IR because we couldn't sell our house. I felt like a failure as a military spouse. This was me. I was like, I listed it, I painted it, I must have done something wrong. I was supposed to sell the house before you got back so we could all move, and you came back and I haven't sold the house. I completely failed. Because that's what we do to ourselves, right? We decide that we're going to sell, and we decide we're going to do something, and we're going to decide that we're going to get something done, but we don't. And we feel like we failed, even though what we thought we were going to do was completely irrational. I couldn't control the market, the housing market in Kingston, any more than I could control the deployment or the fact that we were posted in the first place. My husband moved IR, and hey, then we ended up selling in about a month. IR was the straw that broke the camel's back. I learned there's a lot of things that I can do as a military spouse. IR is not one of them. I was like a whiny baby the entire time he was gone. That is not how I intended for my marriage to work. Thankfully, we didn't have to do it very long because I don't know how well I would have done. And we ended up here. We're here in Edmonton. What's funny is that I get a lot when we go back to the regiment. They're like, oh, tough getting back used to the tempo of operations at the regiment. And I think, like, my husband was home for a grand total of 18 months out of the 3 years that we were posted to Kingston. But I guess the tempo of operations at the regiment might be a little bit difficult to get used to. That's just us, though. It finds us here, and it's just me. And every single time that I speak, I say there is absolutely no reason that I'm standing in front of anybody else talking about what it's like to be a military family. Work for the fact that I'm willing to do this, and the rest of you want to throw up about the idea of standing up in front of people and talking. That's the only reason that I tell the stories and everybody else listens. It's because nobody else wants to be the one standing up. Everybody has a different experience, and one great thing about being posted to Kingston is we all have different trades, we all have different jobs, we all have different postings, we all come from different units, we all have different family structures, religious, political, social diversity. So what is our goal? What is our long-term goal when it comes to resiliency? And that's where I want to kind of look back on the story. I want to look back on what worked and what didn't work. So when we look at resiliency, and I actually have a slide for this. Look at that. Oh, we'll get back to that. Okay. When we look at resiliency, see, I told her that we had this in the right order, but I totally decided against it halfway through. So when we looked at what worked and what didn't, what worked was what didn't work was having stuff handed to me. So sometimes I really needed help. In 2002, I had a driver that helped from the regiment, not like all the time, but handful of times. They let me have a driver that took me to hospital appointments that I couldn't otherwise. I wasn't allowed to drive myself to, and I didn't know anybody else in the city that could possibly take me. That was great. I needed that. But it didn't teach me how to find the people that could have supported me. So I don't know that that built resiliency. It solved a crisis. It didn't build resiliency. that is a temporary fix. It's kind of like free childcare. It's kind of like anything that we're being given is just trying to fill a hole and plug a need, and sometimes we need that. We might be new to a community, we might, have exhausted our resources, but it doesn't help us learn how to be resilient. It doesn't help us learn how to handle this situation the next time it comes up and the time after that. So what does cause resiliency? If we establish that it's not free gifts, it's not crisis management, it's not free services, then it has to be something else. And I think that it starts with community. Now, the reason that I put this one ahead, and we'll maybe go back to that if we have time, is that we can't really help build a community unless we've been able to look after ourselves. And so we need to kind of think about the ways that we need to, grow ourselves to a place of strength that we're able to kind of help with our community itself. I think that resiliency is empowerment. When I gave this talk in Cornwall, I really focused on the fact that we are the ones that are going to build our own resiliency. Military spouses, as a group, we're the ones that need to take control of our community, and we're not the ones that are doing it. We're relying on it being done for us. And so the best way that we can be supported is by allowing us the opportunity to run with the ideas and suggestions and the goals that we have as military spouses ourselves. We are not helpless. We just need help knowing the how. We need help with training. We need help with communicating. We need help with people seeing the potential of the ideas that they have so they can run with them. Resiliency is also admitting when we need help. It's being able to stand up and saying, I fell down and life is messy. It's being able to admit that that we can't do everything ourselves. We have a social worker in Kingston, and while my husband was deployed, I was constantly like standing in front of other spouses and chains of command and the work that I had to do at the MFRC there, and then I would haul my butt every once in a while down to Holly's office, and I would open her door and be like, do you have a meeting? And if she said no, I'd plop myself down on that chair and I'd tell her all the ways that this was terrible. I never, ever, ever want to do it again. And she would just sit there and she would listen, and she would help point me in the right direction. And sometimes she would be the one to point out, no, Kim, that's not normal. That's not what you should be experiencing right now, and you need help. You need to work on that. We need to be able to stand up and say that we need help. And I do my very best. If there's anything that I do well, and she is fierce, it's telling people how really messed up I am sometimes. I think that that's a goal that I have, making sure everybody knows that. And I've done a pretty good job, I think. Nobody thinks I'm perfect. Nobody thinks my marriage is perfect. Nobody thinks that I've never gone to, say, a regimental dinner wearing a slip. Nobody thinks any of those things about me. And that's okay. I'm okay being the one that people can realize that, you know what, we've all screwed up, and we all are going to screw up, and life is supposed to look like that. If we plan for our needs, then we avoid being in crisis later, right? So the benefits of getting help is that you do it before you collapse, and then you don't collapse. So resiliency is admitting when we need the help before we get to that point. Resiliency then is also its community. It's seeking each other and figuring out what we need. Part of that community is being willing to accept all of the people that we meet in our life. Now, all the people that we meet, it doesn't mean we're going to be best friends with every person that we've met in our military journey, and I am not going to pretend that every single military spouse you're ever going to meet is going to be joy and sunshine and you're going to want to be best friends. That's not going to be the case. In fact, I can almost guarantee that there is going to be at least one spouse, if not many, that are going to treat you badly for reasons that don't make sense. They're going to treat you badly because they think that your spouse's rank isn't high enough. They're going to treat you badly because they don't like you personally. They're going to treat you badly because they're insecure or because they feel like they've had more experience than you. That's going to happen. I 100% guarantee it. But if you decide that you are going to let those experiences cloud the rest of your time as a military spouse, and you are going to avoid other spouses and other community and situations because those people treated you badly, then you are going to miss out on all the people that are worth your time. And those people are out there. Nothing makes me more frustrated than someone telling me kind of passive aggressively that they don't need the military spouse community because those people, you know, they're not. And I always think, you know what, I am one of those people. So I'm not sure what it is you're trying to say. We rob ourselves of the opportunity to have community when we decide that we let those small-minded people create that entire group for us. So part of community is realizing that we need to get along with everybody. And that's going to bring me back here, to this one. So some of you might have read my post. It's called Mini Dresses and Wrong Tattoos. And it is entirely about the fact that at one point I was an 18-year-old military significant other, and I made two very glaring, very obvious mistakes. One of them involves the fact that when I was 18 years old, my husband went for basic training, and I went out and I took the cover of a DVD, or would have been a VHS, that I owned that had a pair of dog tags on it, and I decided, you know what a good girlfriend would do? A good girlfriend would get a tattoo of dog tags when her husband joins the military. So I took that picture, and I went and got that tattoo on my butt. And it looks, that is not it, just so you know, because I wouldn't do that to you. I found that on the internet. But it looks pretty similar to that. Now, I'm assuming that the vast majority of you guys that are watching this know what is wrong with that picture. Do you guys know what's wrong with that picture? I can't hear you, but I'm pretty sure you know. That is not what Canadian dog tags look like. And I actually did not even have the slightest idea that that was the issue until he came home from basic training. So clearly they're still there. I can't fix them. It's over. Kind of looks like maybe they're a keychain or something. Thankfully, nobody can really see them. Now, what happened again was that probably that next year, I probably could cover it up, but the thing is, it's a really painful place to get tattooed, and also I'm lazy. So if I'm going to spend money on a tattoo, it's probably not going to be there because only one person can see it. So about a year after that, my husband would have got to the regiment. He would have just got to the regiment, and so they had this big party. It was the 100th anniversary of the regiment, fancy extravaganza. And so I thought, I need to get a dress for this. It's semi-formal. I don't know anything about semi-formal dresses, but I'm going to find me one. And I did. I think maybe at Sirens. I don't even know where I thought I was. It is not Kim's butt. Do not tell people that that's what happened here today. So anyway. I went to like Sirens and I bought a dress. I'm not even joking, you guys. I cannot find the dress anymore. I did find one picture of it somewhere. I have had it destroyed. It is, it was probably about, I don't know, it was so small, you guys. Like, and you couldn't wear anything underneath it at all. I entirely thought that that was an appropriate dress to wear to a formal, semi-formal dinner. Like, I did. I really 100% did. Anyway, fast forward probably about 10 years, I went to another big dinner, and I'm looking around at some of the spouses, and I am so judgmental, like, no idea. I'm sitting in my head and I'm looking at these young girls, and now I'm older, right, because I'm like 28. And I'm like, whew, well, that is not okay. I cannot believe she's wearing that to this store. Like, why would she wear that? That's not okay. And I am already writing her off because she doesn't know any better than to wear that kind of dress to a fancy dinner. Until my husband comes up behind me, kind of puts his arms around me. He said, remember that dress that you wore in 2000 to that celebration? I thought, oh, right. Well, I clearly could be excused for this. Do you know how many times we judge other spouses for getting where we've been? I'm pretty sure that those dog tags, if I could see them, which I cannot, would remind me of the fact that I am in no place to judge anyone. I'm also in no place, it also reminds me very much that I'm in no place to tell people what they should wear to mess dinners ever. I'll never give you advice on that. But even more importantly, it reminds me that I cannot limit my community by trying to think that I know better than anybody else, right? I can't limit my community by deciding that my experiences have been more important to them. We have a tendency sometimes as spouses to turn this life into a pissing contest where we want to sit down, and that's why I hate bios sometimes, because before I speak, whoever's introducing me is going to come on and they're going to tell you all about, you know, mine and Nathan's journey in the military, and it's going to sound a lot like we're trying to justify why I have the right to speak to you. you know, I've done this, I've seen this, I've been through this, I have this many deployments behind us as a family, we have, you know, this many postings, as though that somehow makes my journey more important than somebody else's journey who doesn't have that same kind of experience. But the truth is that we all just have different journey that we're on, and we're all just trying to get through it in the best way that we know how. And it's certainly nobody's fault one way or the other whether or not they've been deployed 6 times or once in their career, and it's certainly not the fault of the family, and we don't need to write them off because their experiences are different than us. So really what this all means is that we need to find and we need to make our community. And there's a few things that you can go about doing that. And I'm going to give a couple of suggestions, and I think that we can do some questions and answers about what you guys think are the best ways to put that together. So there's a couple of ways that in our life I've created community. One of those is in Kingston. We started the Spouses Night Out group. And I like this story because it's the easiest possible way. I went on to Facebook, and there was the spouses group. You know, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're horrifying. But I went on there to look at it, and I saw this post, and there was this new spouse, and she's like, we just moved into the community. I'm wondering if, you know, there's a coffee time or something where I can make some new friends, meet some people. I don't know anybody. And the responses were all along the lines of, good luck. I've been here 5 years and I haven't met anyone. Basically saying the exact same thing, all of them. And I looked at that and I thought, okay, well, why doesn't somebody have a coffee time then? And so I went on Facebook and I clicked on the little group and I clicked create events. And I picked a date that worked for me, and I picked a restaurant, and I said, I'm going to hang out at this restaurant by myself on this day. If anyone wants to come and meet other people, I'm going to be there. You're welcome to come. And well over 30 spouses just showed up. They just came. Out of most of them, the vast majority of them knew no one. And out of that, we created what we call the Spouses Night Out group. It was not funded by anyone else. It was not sanctioned by the military or, you know, MFS or MFRC or anything like that. Eventually we took it to the MFRC so that they could help us promote it, and they did, and they loved the idea, but at the same time this was put together by other spouses for other spouses, and we had entire control over what we did or who we met with. And it wasn't hard. Nobody had to, like, you know, work overtime trying to book locations or create events, or we just went places together, and we put on Facebook when we were going, and we created a schedule once a month for, you know, the next 10 months, and people showed up, and different people showed up at different events. And the best part about it was most of the people who came were people who didn't know anybody else, because that's why they came, and they knew it was a place where everybody was in the same boat and they could just show up like that. It was amazing. The other thing that we've done is we've done the deployment project. So when my spouse went on his last deployment to the Middle East, I just read a book. It was called Dinner with the Smileys, and it's an American book. This woman's spouse was deployed for 12 months with the American Navy, and she decided to spend that time. Putting together. Every week she had someone else over for dinner, and I thought, this is amazing. And so I decided to do that, and I just sent out invitations to anybody I could think of. I was like, maybe people will show up. Well, we had someone every single Sunday night for my husband's deployment, except for the times that we weren't available. Everyone from our neighbors to police officers, MMA fighters. We had the general of the division. We had a member of parliament, the MLA. We had radio personalities. But what we gained was community. We gained excitement. We gave a chance for my kids to look forward to things. We had an amazing opportunity to create a community, and people asked all kinds of questions. They wanted to know what they could do. So I don't think that it's as hard as we think it is to build our military community where we're at. Whether we are at a base where, like Edmonton, where I am now, where there's thousands and thousands of military families here, or whether you're, you know, off in PEI or Meaford or other places, or you live far from base, there's always an opportunity to build your community so that you can have that support network. Sometimes it's going to be online, like things like this. It's always going to be something. There's always going to be an availability to do it. But to go back and just end off with that first story that I told, the lieutenant that I met at my husband's regiment, the more that I thought about what he said, the more I realized that we are all kind of sitting around waiting for our regiment, waiting for our supports, our MFRC, our whatever it is. We're waiting for them to give us a reason to be proud of the military community. We're waiting for them to give us what we're waiting for them to make our community for us. This year, my husband's regiment has lost 3 members in the past 6 months who have lost their battle with PTSD or have otherwise passed away suddenly. And when I think about what the community has looked like at his regiment for those people who knew, these members that have passed, it is not the, chain of command doing something that I remember. What I remember is that all of them called each other, sometimes for the first time in forever. They started texting each other. They started sending messages where they were like, do you want to do coffee? Do you want to just talk? I just need you to tell me that you're okay, man, because I can't do this again. They were the ones.
Excuse me, Kim?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to turn your camera off for just a moment, please?
Yes. Is that better?
Thank you. Yeah, and you may have to just for a couple minutes, and then you can try it again.
Okay. They were the ones that created the community for themselves. They were the ones that made that work when they needed it. It wasn't because the government offered them a special program or because someone funded something that they could all show up for free. This was them all realizing that they had to create that community for themselves, and they had to do it quickly because they didn't want to lose anyone else. And so for that lieutenant, he was just sitting there waiting. Is it really? It's awesome. Sorry, Krista just sent me a message saying my sweater's on the inside out. She was really sweet and did it privately, but you can all know that because that goes along with everything that I was just talking about. Anyway, okay. We're better now. Look at that. Now I look way more put together. So, anyway.
You can put your camera back on.
We are, oh, see, I turned it off. See, look, now it's back together. See, I'm not inside out anymore. Okay. So, as I was wrapping up there to say that this lieutenant, his story really reminded me of the fact that it has been those times where I've seen communities come together. It's never been because somebody created that community for us. It's always been because we created that community for ourselves. So I think that that's the most important thing that we can put together if we're trying to build our own resiliency. It's that this is on us. We are responsible for how we look at the life that we've been given here, and we need to create that ourselves. So I wanted to leave a few minutes for you guys to be able to ask me questions. Most of them I'm hoping are not going to be related to that tattoo, which, for the record, that was not my butt, just so you know. I wanted to leave you with this quote. This is my favorite, and I've had it up in the past couple offices that I've worked at, and I even left it with some of my mentors in Kingston. Because I think that this is 100% what my philosophy is when it comes to building this community, is that we need all kinds of stuff, and traveling, and beauty, and coffee. I don't know why coffee's not on the list, but we need coffee. But mostly we need each other. We need other people. We need to be that other person. And we can't expect to have those other people without being that other person. Too often, I think we sit there waiting for someone to be that for us. And I think that we would be pleasantly surprised that we'll find those people if we start being that person for someone else first. And I think that that is the key to us finding better things. So now is the time where you guys get to ask me questions. And hopefully you have a question, maybe.
Okay, if you want to just raise your hand if you have any questions.
Or if you just want to say something like, hey, your shirt looks really nice now that it's not inside out. You can say that.
Oh, there's one. Joanna.
I think it's more just a comment, like throughout you've mentioned that there have been times where you felt like your voice maybe shouldn't be the one speaking because so many other people have more dramatic stories or more challenging circumstances. And And I would just like to say, like, I feel that way all the time. My husband's in the Navy, yet in 7 years of marriage, he's only sailed 3 months. And so I haven't had to endure long deployments and all of that. But at the same hand, it doesn't devalue the experiences that we all have in the military. You know, like, we still have that, we don't have control of our lives, really. You know, like, we, at a moment's notice, that can all change, and we wait for messages to come, and we move to homes we don't necessarily like. And so I want to say thanks for sharing your voice, because there's thousands of us out there who maybe our experiences aren't traumatic, but it doesn't make them any less important to us. And our experiences still matter. And so I think we appreciate your voice for that very reason.
Thank you. And I think that we need to really remember the fact that if we all want to be, we can't all be, you know, one deployment away from completely losing our shit, right? Some of us have to have it together sometimes, while the rest of us, you know, are dealing with something. There's a reason why it's a diverse community, because we need to be in different spots to be able to support each other.
So one other way, if you don't want to raise your hand, if you want to take your pointer on the top left-hand side of the screen and claim a spot on the board, and just take a moment with that, and maybe write a few comments or a question or a thought that you might have had from today's session. So your top left-hand side is a big, thick blue arrow. If you click on it, then you click somewhere on your board, and then you can claim a white spot, and then use the text tool, the T beside it, to write your thoughts or your comments. So just grab your pointer on the top left-hand side. There we go. I see our students have it. Any other questions? Or you can raise your hand too as well. Okay. And while we're waiting for people to write their questions, or I put in the chat a little survey evaluation, because we're going to have a door prize as well as at the end of this session. So if you just double-click on the SurveyMonkey link, and that will take you to a brief survey just to share what you thought about Kim's presentation today. And we're going to be here. If you want to write your comments on the whiteboard, just use your Krista.
Hi, I do have a question, actually. And my question is, when you took your spouses group and then went to the MFRC and kind of got their help with it, what happened from there? So, for example, I'm in the same city as you, but right now my husband is posted at the brigade headquarters, and I wanted to reach out to the spouses at the brigade headquarters, but I'm finding it very difficult because it's, as you said, people from everywhere. It's all over. It's kind of like Kingston, only a much smaller scale. So how do you get from going from your like tiny little spouses group, I guess, to getting more involved in the military? Because I'd like to then take this back to the regiment when I go back to the regiment next year.
If it's something that, like, for the spouses night out, it was base-wide. Like, any spouse posted anywhere within the Kingston area was invited to take part. So when we took it to the MFRC, what I asked them was, like, what did they see themselves as being involved with that? And they didn't take it over at all. I mean, most MFRCs are going to tell you they'd rather you ran with your own ideas. We actually didn't want to hand it over to them because we liked having a sex toy party and wine night, and we weren't allowed to have that at the MFRC. So we were happy with keeping it to ourselves. What they helped with was advertising, so they started putting it out in their newsletters. When they gave deployment newsletters or community newsletters, we put posters up at the MFRC, and the social workers then were even aware of it, and the other, you know, the family, I was the family network facilitator, but the people that work there knew about it. So as people came in, if they were looking for, ways to make friends, to meet people, to get to know them, they were able to let them know about this particular group. So mostly what they helped us with was communicating it to the group.
That was my question. Did they help with communication? What's that?
Oh, absolutely. They were more than willing to, let us put up posters. And every time they advertised it, they would just put it as like, on behalf of the community, you're invited to, instead of it being an MFRC related function. But they totally advertised it within like their emails and stuff like that.
Oh, that's perfect. Because yeah, as I said, I attend regimental functions a lot, as you do. But to get the spouses from the whole brigade is obviously not going to happen, but I can try at least to get as many Edmonton spouses as possible coming together. And so I'm limited by what the regiment is using as its advertising medium. So that was my question, was how did they help you with communicating? And so I'm really glad that they did. So that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that you'd find that they, like on their Facebook pages, they would advertise for us. I know the ED here in Edmonton, and she's, a really big advocate of helping spouses be able to kind of take on this stuff themselves. The thing is that every MFRC, all these groups, they're coming at it with their own, overworked staff and funding issues. So when you're telling them that you want to do this, or you already have this successfully happening, and you're just looking to reach more people, they're generally more than willing to help out and share that. So I think that you would totally have help with that. I personally also went to chains of command, and I did my best to talk to COs and RSMs and the people that would be able to bring it up in O groups and among the members as well. I don't find that that's usually as helpful for advertising, because for every 10 members that you tell, one of them is actually going to tell their spouse, but it's still something. And it's usually, at least mildly helpful in when they know about it. They can, if they hear somebody talking about their spouse not meeting other people, they, water cooler talk, whatever, water cooler, vehicle talk, it comes up. So the more people that know about it, the better.
Perfect. Thank you.
Kim, there's one lovely comment on the bottom of the screen here that's kind of hard to see. It says, there's so much in your presentation that resonates from my experience as a military spouse. I got out in '91. My now ex got out in 2001, I believe. It's small writing. Isolation is a debilitating experience for spouses, and sometimes it's hard to reach out. So I love to hear when people are more aware of their surroundings, who might be in need. That was one of the comments there.
Oh, thank you.
Now, Tammy, what's your thoughts there?
Hi there. So I actually work with the family networks across Canada. Kim, great to finally see your voice. We actually did meet when you first moved to Kingston. So I don't know if you remember me.
And then your husband worked at the gym, if I'm correct.
That is correct, absolutely. So, and then we moved. Then we were posted out CAN. So I was very happy to see the family networks up and running. That was a project that I actually brought to Central Canada, and then I got posted out CAN. So so very happy, makes a heart sing to see you take it and move it forward, and the great work that you've done in Central Canada and across the country. Thank you. Your voice is it's just giving me goosies. I know that sounds kind of fluffy and foo-foo, but honestly, sitting here in San Diego at my office here, I'm just like, wow. So from the bottom of my heart, from one military spouse to another, thank you. So, and I love all that you've shared. You're absolutely right with the different experiences, and I always try to, as I move from place to place and from one journey to another, is that everybody's journey is unique, and you learn from each other. It doesn't matter how many postings, how many deployments, and those are not necessarily things that, you learn from each other from different experiences, and I guess that's what makes you so well-rounded and well-grounded. And for me, it's an honor and a pleasure to to hear you and to have met you, and I look forward to seeing you again in person. So thank you so much for your time and the efforts that you share with all military families across the country. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy.
Wonderful, Tammy.
You should definitely have me come out to San Diego.
There you go.
Because I'm telling you, I get, calls from Cold Lake, but that just does not sound as appealing. Cold Lake is a great place, but I feel like San Diego calls to me.
Heather, did you want to share what you wrote down on the whiteboard? You're muted at the moment.
You can't see everybody's thing on the whiteboard. I can see.
So Heather, let me just unmute you. Heather, how are you?
Hello?
Hi, Heather. Oh, she just muted again. Hi, Heather. I can hear you.
Hi. Yeah, I don't, I'd rather just type.
No problem at all. That's great. I just want to make sure. And Julie, I see that your arrow is there. Did you have any points you wanted to add? Julie, I'm muted. I'll unmute you. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sorry. No, I'm just having some struggles with the arrows. I'm trying to figure out. Sorry.
No worries at all. Well, so we're very, very thankful. Are there any other questions or comments? So we're very appreciative that you were able to come tonight, Kim. The Musings of a Canadian Military Spouse, you have a great voice, and you have a voice that rings true to so many of us as military families. We're going to do a random draw now for 2 special books. Kim, can you share Modern Military Spouse, the story on that?
Yeah, so there's not a lot of resources book-wise for Canadian military spouses, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware. Most of the resources that are available are American. These ones aren't much different. I am actually working on on something along those lines that would be Canadian, but until then, we're going to rely on American ones. So my friend Joanne and a couple of other ladies who are American military spouses, they put together a really cool book. It is an ebook online. I got the chance to read it, an advanced copy. It is really well done. You're going to see that it is a little bit American specific in terms of the terminology and some of the information on going to college and that kind of thing. But when it comes to resiliency and community and, how to make the best of your life, I love the positive spin that their book puts on it. It actually comes with like some free downloads of like lists, pre-deployment lists and pre-posting lists and stuff like that as well, which I think is really cool. So what is really neat is that this this conference has decided to give away a copy of their book. So I think you guys would be quite thrilled to take a look at it.
Fantastic, and congratulations to Holly. You've won the Modern Military Spouse book, and Melissa, you've won the While You're Away 101 Tips for Families. And I'll be in contact with you so that you can actually, there's a series that you can check. You can choose from the series, and you just let me know which one you want, and I'll order it for you and have it sent to you. Shut the front door, Holly, you did it! I love that. That's wonderful. As Kim has mentioned before, we're really excited about this series that's in partnership with True Patriot Love. The next one is January 20th at the same time, and it's going to be Heroes Are Human. So please come out. Vince Savoy has a story. He's an RCMP, and he has quite an interesting story of a murder investigation that he did. And how it changed his world.
I've actually been to the Heroes Are Human conference when it came to Kingston, and it's really well done. So it's going to be really good.
Yes, and then on January 28th, we have Jody Minnick. So please feel free to invite friends from another posting, because it's all about connecting people regardless of where we're located, right? And thank you so much, Kim, for coming out and agreeing to doing this. It's been fantastic working with you. I can't wait for the next project.
You guys have a good night.
Hey, good night.